Cowboy, take me away from here." The Apache woman begged when she saw him at the market. The market in the small frontier town was alive with sound and movement, a busy, dusty place where the sun beat down relentlessly on wooden stalls and the dirt streets. People called out to each other, trading goods, gossip, and news from nearby settlements. The smell of fresh bread mingled with the tang of horses and the sharp scent of leather from the saddles. Children ran in circles, laughing and shouting, their bare feet kicking up little clouds of dust. The air was a mix of excitement, tension, and the ever-present hum of survival that marked life in the Old West. Among the crowd moved Nokomis, an Apache woman, small but strong in stature, her dark eyes alert and wary. She wore a plain dress, simple but neat, with a shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Her hands clutched a small bundle of goods she had managed to trade for earlier that morning: dried corn, a few cloth scraps, and a small piece of soap. Every step she took was cautious. She had learned long ago that the world outside her village could be cruel, especially for someone of her people. The market was bustling, but she kept her head low, avoiding the loud, boisterous men and the curious glances of strangers who might not mean her any good. Nokomis had come to the town for a purpose. It was not just to buy or trade. She was also looking for a way to secure her future, to find some hope in a world that had grown increasingly dangerous. Her village had suffered raids from men who wanted to claim the land, take what they wanted, and leave destruction behind. Families had been scattered, homes burned, and lives upended. Nokomis had survived, but she knew she could not stay hidden forever. She had to find someone she could trust, someone strong enough to help her reach safety. As she walked slowly past the stalls, her eyes caught something, or someone, that made her pause. Across the square, standing near a pile of stacked barrels and bundles of hay, was a man she had seen before, though only from a distance. Caleb, a cowboy known in the region for his quiet strength and sense of fairness, was speaking briefly with a merchant, inspecting the quality of the hides for sale. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with a calm confidence that drew attention without effort. His hat shaded his eyes from the harsh sun, but his posture and the way he held himself gave away a sense of authority and care. For a moment, Nokomis froze. She had heard stories about him from travelers and traders passing through her village, how he had helped those in need, how he had stood up to bullies and outlaws alike. He did not seek fame or recognition, but his deeds were whispered about across towns and settlements. The memory of these stories made her heart race. Could he be the person who might help her? Could she trust a man she had never spoken to before? The crowd of people moved around her, and she stepped cautiously to the side, letting a wagon full of flour barrels pass. Her eyes never left Caleb, and when he glanced in her direction, their eyes met for a brief, silent moment. She quickly looked away, feeling a strange mix of fear and hope. That fleeting glance told her nothing in words, but somehow it carried an unspoken message. There was something about him, something that gave her a small spark of courage. Nokomis took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The market was loud, with merchants shouting, children laughing, and the occasional bark of a dog. She forced herself to focus on her steps, on the rhythm of her movement, but her mind kept returning to Caleb. Every instinct in her told her to turn and flee, to hide among the crowded stalls and avoid drawing attention. Yet another part of her, quieter but stronger, whispered that this man might be her only chance to escape the danger that shadowed her every day. She moved closer, keeping a careful distance, weaving through the throngs of people, perspective and spices, inhaling the sharp aroma of sage and thyme, and paused to glance at a row of freshly baked bread loaves. The smell made her stomach growl, reminding her of the hunger she often endured when traveling far from her village. A young boy nearby tripped over his own feet, and she stepped aside just in time to avoid knocking him over. He looked up at her with wide eyes, then ran to his mother, giggling. As Nokomis continued through the market, she observed the people around her. Some were familiar faces from nearby settlements, traders she had seen before. Others were strangers, men and women whose intentions she could not read. She noted the way some of the cowboys moved, hands resting near their holsters, eyes scanning the crowd. Her heart tightened. In this world, trust was rare, and danger could come at any moment. Finally, she stopped near a stall that sold cloth and simple household items. She picked up a piece of fabric, running her fingers over its texture, but her mind was elsewhere. Across the square, Caleb had moved slightly, examining the goods on another stall. He looked calm, unhurried, yet every movement suggested awareness of his surroundings. Bull. Nokomis watched him, feeling an unexplainable pull. She knew she had to find a way to speak to him, but her voice felt trapped in her throat. Time seemed to slow as she debated what to do. She wanted to approach him directly, to explain her situation, to ask for help. Yet every instinct screamed caution. The market was full of eyes, and if anyone suspected she was seeking a favor from a stranger, it could put her in greater danger. She glanced around, noting a few empty spaces between stalls where she could perhaps make contact without being noticed. Her heart pounded in her chest. This was not just about finding food or supplies. It was about survival, about the faint hope of freedom. She thought of her family scattered across the plains and of her village still threatened by the constant presence of men who sought to take what was not theirs. Breaths spent hiding, listening to the wind and wondering if another raid would come. And she thought of Caleb, standing quietly amidst the noise, a potential ally in a world that had given her little reason to trust. Nokomis took another step, then another, moving cautiously closer. She kept her eyes on him but avoided drawing attention to herself. As she approached, the noise of the market seemed to fade, replaced by the thudding of her own heartbeat. Every step felt heavier, every breath measured. She knew that this moment, this decision to speak to him, could change everything. And then, almost instinctively, she found herself near him. The world around her, the shouting merchants, the laughing children, the dust swirling in the sunlight, seemed to blur. She lifted her eyes to his, searching for any sign of understanding, any hint of kindness. The seconds stretched, filled with tension and the fragile hope that perhaps, just perhaps, this stranger could help her escape the dangers that had haunted her for so long. For the first time in what felt like months, Nokomis felt a small spark of hope. It was fragile, like the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. But it was real. And in that spark she made a silent promise to herself. She would take the risk, she would speak to him, because doing nothing had only led to fear and despair. Nokomis stood there for a long moment, her heart hammering in her chest as she tried to summon the courage to move closer. The market was still noisy around her, but her attention was fixed entirely on Caleb. She studied his face, the calm determination in his eyes, the slight curve of his lips as he exchanged a few quiet words with a merchant. There was something about him that made her feel a rare sense of safety, even in the middle of the bustling town. She had watched him before, from a distance, noticing how he treated people. He was respectful, careful not to harm anyone, yet firm enough that it was clear he could protect himself and others if needed. That observation gave her a flicker of hope. Could this man, a stranger to her, be someone who would understand her fear, her urgency, and the danger that had followed her across the plains? Nokomis took a deep breath, steadying herself. She knew that every second she hesitated was a moment wasted, and yet the fear of approaching him was strong. What if he refused? What if someone saw her talking to him and misinterpreted her intentions? But staying silent had left her with nothing but fear. She could not allow herself to wait any longer. Slowly, carefully, she stepped closer. Her steps were quiet, almost timid, but each one carried a weight of determination. She moved through the gaps between the busy stalls, letting the clamor of the market provide a cover for her approach. The smell of fresh bread, roasting meat, and the dusty earth filled her senses, but she barely noticed. Her mind was focused entirely on the man ahead. As she drew near, she rehearsed her words in her mind. Please. Help me. Take me away. Breaths. The thought of speaking aloud made her throat dry, and she swallowed hard. She glanced around, noticing the other townspeople moving through the market, unaware of the silent tension building between the two of them. The child ran past her, laughing and tugging at his mother's skirt. But she did not notice. The world seemed to shrink, narrowing to the distance between herself and Caleb. Finally, she reached a spot near him. Her hand clutched the shawl around her shoulders as if it could give her strength. She could feel the warmth of the sun on her skin, the dust in the air, the faint smell of horses from the nearby stables. But dusk. And then, finding a quiet moment, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Cowboy. Take me away from here, she said, the words trembling, almost lost in the market noise. Caleb turned slowly, his eyes meeting hers. For a moment, he did not speak. He studied her face, taking in the fear, the desperation, and the silent plea for help. He could see the years of struggle etched in her expression, the weariness in her posture, and the unspoken story behind her eyes. It was a lot to take in at once, and yet he did not shy away. He remained calm, letting her words sink in. Nokomis held her breath, waiting, praying silently that he would understand. The seconds stretched, filled with tension and the weight of unspoken fear. Around them, the market continued its noisy rhythm, but for the two of them, it felt as if time had slowed. Every glance, every subtle movement became magnified in importance. Caleb finally nodded slightly, a gesture that gave her a small surge of hope. He did not speak yet, but the calm in his eyes suggested he was listening, considering, and perhaps even willing to help. Nokomis felt a cautious relief wash over her, though it was tempered by the reality of the danger that still surrounded her. This was only the first step. Trust would take more than a glance. It would take action, careful planning, and courage from both of them. She took a small step closer, her voice firmer this time, though still careful. I need to leave. I cannot stay here. They will come for me if I do. Her words were honest and simple, stripped of embellishment. They carried the weight of truth, of a life spent avoiding harm, of a past filled with loss and fear. Caleb listened, nodding occasionally, encouraging her to continue. Nokomis glanced around quickly, making sure no one was paying too much attention to them. The market was crowded, but her instincts told her that prying eyes could notice her if she lingered too long. Frowned in despair. She continued, describing in simple terms the dangers she faced, the raids, the loss of her family, and the fear that had shadowed her every step since those attacks. Caleb remained silent, absorbing her words with patience and care. You do not know me, she added, her voice breaking slightly, but I have nowhere else to go. I do not know who else to ask. The vulnerability in her tone was honest and raw, reflecting the years of struggle she had endured. Caleb did not recoil or dismiss her. He simply kept listening, the quiet presence of a man willing to understand, providing her with a small comfort she had not felt in a long time. For a few moments there was silence. The noise of the market pressed around them. Yet within that small space, there was a fragile connection forming. Caleb finally spoke, his voice calm, measured, and steady. You're brave to ask, he said simply. Despair. It's not easy to trust someone in a place like this. Nokomis nodded, relieved to hear a voice that did not judge or question her. I have to leave, she said again, repeating the simple truth that had brought her here. I cannot stay. I cannot, she hesitated, the fear creeping back, and then swallowed hard, forcing herself to continue. Bray, I have no one else to help me. Caleb considered her words carefully. He thought of the risks, of the townspeople who might object, of the lawmen who would frown on helping her, and of the unknown dangers ahead. And yet he could see the honesty in her eyes, the desperation, and the courage it had taken to approach him in the first place. He felt a quiet resolve grow inside him. She had trusted him enough to speak her truth. He would not turn away. Breath. I can help, he said finally, his tone steady but gentle. It won't be easy and it won't be safe, but I can help you leave this place. Nokomis felt a surge of relief, her heart lifting slightly. She nodded, unable to fully speak, overwhelmed by a mixture of hope, gratitude, and cautious fear. For the first time in what felt like forever, she imagined the possibility of escape, of a life where she could breathe freely and be safe. Thank you, she whispered, barely audible. Caleb nodded again, understanding that words were not enough to convey the gravity of their moment. But he motioned for her to follow him, quietly, guiding her to a less crowded side street where they could speak without prying eyes. As they moved, Nokomis felt a strange mix of fear and relief. She had taken the first step, spoken the words that had been trapped inside her for so long, and now she had someone willing to help. The market continued behind them, bustling and loud, but in that moment it felt as though the world had shifted. She was no longer entirely alone. Walking beside Caleb, she kept her head low, observing the narrow streets and the back alleys they passed. He spoke quietly, giving her instructions on how to avoid drawing attention, explaining which paths were safest, and asking simple questions about her situation. Every word, every gesture reassured her. She could feel the beginnings of trust forming, fragile but growing, like the first green shoots of spring after a long winter. By the time they reached a quieter area on the edge of town, Nokomis felt a cautious optimism she had not dared to feel in months. She had taken the risk to speak, and Caleb had responded with understanding and action. It was only the beginning, she knew, but it was a beginning nonetheless. In the back streets and the fading sunlight, Nokomis realized that the courage to ask for help could change everything. She had faced danger, fear, and uncertainty to reach this moment, and now, with Caleb by her side, she felt that maybe, just maybe, she could find the safety and freedom she had been longing for. Nokomis followed Caleb through the narrow back streets of the town, her steps quiet, her mind racing with thoughts. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of hope, but it was mixed with fear. She did not know exactly how much help Caleb could give her, nor did she know how dangerous their plan would become. But yet she trusted him in a way she had not trusted anyone in years, and that trust made her heart beat with cautious courage. They paused behind a small stable at the edge of town, away from the noise and the prying eyes of the market. Caleb lowered his voice, his tone calm but firm. "You can't stay in town," he said. "Oh, they'll notice if you're gone for long and questions will be asked. We need a plan, a way for you to get out safely without anyone knowing." Nokomis nodded, her hands clenching the edges of her shawl. She had been through dangerous situations before, but this was different. This was not just hiding or escaping for a short time. This was planning a real journey to safety. She had to trust Caleb completely, and in that moment, she did. Breaths. Caleb looked around the empty alley, making sure no one was watching, and then spoke again. "We need to move carefully, slowly. First, you'll need supplies. Food, water, and some clothes you can move easily in. We'll also need to think about where you can go. The journey will not be easy, and you have to be ready for whatever might happen.
Nokomis felt a mixture of relief and anxiety.
She had always been self-reliant, but she knew that this journey would be dangerous and that she could not do it alone. She began to describe what she had already packed and what she could carry. Caleb listened patiently, making suggestions for what else they would need. He mentioned items that would help them travel quietly and safely: blankets, a small cooking pot, and a sturdy rope. As they spoke, Caleb asked her about the terrain they would have to cross, about the areas where people might be looking for her, and about any places she knew that could provide shelter. Nokomis shared what little information she had, remembering every hidden path and every safe spot she had learned during her months of running and hiding. Caleb took note of everything, his mind already forming a plan. "You'll need to rest tonight. Get your strength back," Caleb said. "Tomorrow, we'll start moving. We'll go through the woods, avoiding the main roads. I know some hidden paths that lead far from the town. We can travel quietly, and no one will see us if we move carefully." Nokomis nodded, a mixture of gratitude and nervousness washing over her. But she had imagined escape many times, but never had it felt so possible, and yet the reality of the plan made her heart race. They would have to leave soon, and every step would require courage, awareness, and trust. They spent the next hour moving through the town in silence, gathering small supplies without attracting attention. Caleb led her to a few trusted friends, people he had helped before, and who would keep their presence secret. They obtained blankets, dried food, and water, all items that could be carried easily. Nokomis felt a strange mix of nervousness and excitement as she held the supplies, imagining the journey ahead. As the sun began to lower in the sky, painting the town in shades of orange and gold, Caleb led Nokomis to a quiet spot behind the stable. "We'll leave at first light," he said. "The journey will be long, but we'll take it one step at a time. But you must trust me and I will guide you. But you must also be ready. Ready for anything." Nokomis nodded again, her thoughts drifting to the dangers that might lie ahead. She thought of the men who had raided her village, of the moments she had hidden in fear, and of the nights spent wondering if she would survive. Now, with Caleb by her side, those fears seemed a little less overwhelming. She felt a spark of hope that had been missing for so long, a belief that maybe she could find safety, freedom, and perhaps even a new beginning. That night, as she lay under a blanket in the hidden corner of the stable, Nokomis thought about the journey to come. She remembered the maps she had seen, the paths through the forests, and the rivers she would need to cross. She imagined the quiet moments when she could rest and breathe without fear. And she thought of Caleb, the calm and steady presence who had given her the courage to speak, to ask for help, and to believe that escape was possible. Morning came slowly, the sun rising over the horizon and casting long shadows across the town. Nokomis and Caleb moved quietly, carrying their supplies and avoiding the main streets. Every sound seemed magnified. The clatter of a cart, the distant barking of a dog, the laughter of children playing in the streets. They moved carefully, their steps light and deliberate, as if the world itself might notice them. They reached the outskirts of town, where the dirt roads gave way to open fields and the distant forest. Caleb stopped and turned to her, his expression serious. "From here, we'll have to be careful. The main trails are watched, and anyone could see us. We'll follow the old paths, hidden by trees and rocks. Keep close to me, and trust what I say." Nokomis nodded, gripping her bundle of supplies tightly. Her heart was pounding, but she felt a strange clarity. She had spent so much time running, hiding, and fearing for her life. But now she was taking control of her own path. But danger was real, but so was the possibility of freedom. The first few hours were tense but uneventful. They moved through fields, then entered the edge of the forest. The trees offered shade and cover, but the terrain was uneven, filled with roots, rocks, and hidden streams. Nokomis stumbled a few times, but Caleb was always nearby, steadying her and offering encouragement. As they moved deeper into the woods, the sounds of the town faded, replaced by birdsong, rustling leaves, and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. Nokomis felt a sense of relief mingled with anxiety. Each step brought them farther from the town and closer to safety, but also deeper into the unknown. She had to trust Caleb completely, and so far he had not given her a reason to doubt him. They paused at a small stream to rest and drink water. Caleb showed her how to refill her canteen carefully and reminded her to conserve energy. Nokomis listened closely, following every instruction. She felt a growing respect for the man who had risked his own safety to help her, who had listened to her story without judgment, and who had guided her with calm and patience. As the day wore on, they continued moving quietly through the forest, rest to rest. Small clearings where they could eat without being seen, and hidden paths that would lead them farther from the town. Nokomis marveled at his knowledge of the land, at his ability to move with confidence through the woods while keeping her safe. By late afternoon, they found a small, hidden clearing near a river. Burse. Caleb motioned for her to rest while he checked the area. Nokomis watched him, her heart full of gratitude. She realized that their journey would not be easy, but she also understood that she was no longer entirely alone. For the first time in a long time, she felt hope, courage, and a sense of possibility. As they settled in for a brief rest, Nokomis reflected on everything that had led to this moment, the fear, the hiding, the long nights of uncertainty, and the moment she had spoken to Caleb in the market. Each memory reminded her of how far she had come, and how much courage it had taken to reach this point. And she knew that, with Caleb's guidance, she might finally reach the safety and freedom she had longed for. Even as the sun began to set, casting golden light through the trees, Nokomis felt a quiet determination growing inside her. She would continue to trust, to follow, and to move forward. The journey would be long and dangerous, but it was also filled with the possibility of a new life, a life free from fear, filled with hope, and guided by the quiet strength of someone who believed in her when no one else had. And in that moment, surrounded by the forest and the fading light, Nokomis understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward, despite it. With Caleb by her side, she felt ready to take the next step, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be. The first light of dawn barely touched the forest when Caleb nudged Nokomis awake. Paint. The sky was painted in soft shades of pink and orange, and the air carried the crisp scent of morning dew and earth. Nokomis stretched, feeling the stiffness from the night, and looked around the small clearing. Everything was quiet except for the soft rustling of leaves and the distant call of birds. For a brief moment, she allowed herself a deep breath of relief. Today the journey would begin. Caleb moved with calm precision, checking their small packs and ensuring that all supplies were secure.
He gave her a reassuring glance.
We need to move quietly, he said, his voice low. Stay close, and don't make sudden movements. The less attention we draw, the better. Nokomis nodded, gripping her bundle tightly. Her nerves were taut like a bowstring, but the quiet confidence in Caleb's eyes gave her a small sense of calm. Every step forward would be a test of patience, courage, and careful observation. She had traveled before, but never under such high stakes. This was different. The possibility of freedom was real, yet so was the danger. They began walking, stepping carefully over roots and stones, navigating the uneven forest floor. The sun rose higher, and the shadows of the trees stretched across their path. Every sound seemed magnified. The distant murmur of a river, the crack of a branch underfoot, the flutter of wings from birds startled by their movement. Nokomis's senses were alert, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and fear. Hours passed, and the forest gradually thickened. Caleb led the way, pointing out small trails hidden beneath overgrown bushes and guiding her around areas that might expose them to view. Nokomis followed, trusting his judgment completely. Occasionally, she would stumble on a rock or a root, but he was always there to steady her, offering a brief nod of encouragement before they moved on. They paused at a small creek to refill their water and rest for a few minutes. Caleb showed her how to gather water safely without attracting attention, and Nokomis listened carefully, absorbing every instruction. She marveled at his calmness and careful planning. He spoke quietly, sharing small stories of his travels and experiences, not to boast, but to reassure her that they could navigate this journey together. The morning passed into afternoon, and the sun climbed high, filtering through the dense canopy. They moved steadily, conserving their energy, careful not to exhaust themselves too early. Nokomis began to notice the rhythm of the journey, the quiet footsteps, the sound of leaves underfoot, the occasional rustle of a small animal nearby. The forest was alive with sound and movement, yet they had found a way to blend in, to move without leaving traces. Despite the challenges, a bond was growing between them. Nokomis felt a strange comfort in Caleb's presence. He never rushed her, never made her feel inadequate, and always offered guidance when she needed it. For the first time in a long time, she felt someone saw her not as a target or a problem, but as a person deserving of help, care, and respect. The day wore on. They encountered obstacles, fallen trees blocking paths, steep inclines that required careful climbing, and narrow passages that demanded caution. Caleb's experience in navigating the wilderness was evident in every decision he made. He chose paths that minimized risk, explained each step to her, and allowed Nokomis to learn as they went. She realized that survival was not just about running or hiding. It was about awareness, patience, and understanding the land. They stopped briefly in a shaded area to rest and eat. Nokomis unwrapped a small portion of bread and dried fruit, sharing some with Caleb. They spoke quietly, mostly about simple things, the direction of the sun, the sounds of the forest, and the ways to move without being seen. Even in the midst of tension, these small moments of conversation brought a sense of normalcy, a fragile reminder that life could hold simple joys even during hardship. As afternoon turned to evening, the forest became thicker, the shadows longer, and the air cooler. But Caleb suggested they find a safe spot to rest for the night, away from any paths where travelers or hunters might appear. They found a small hollow between two large rocks, partially hidden by low branches and bushes. It was not comfortable, but it offered shelter and concealment. While they settled in, Nokomis reflected on the journey so far. Every step had been a lesson about patience, trust, and courage. She remembered the moment she had first spoken to Caleb in the market, and how that single act of bravery had set this entire journey into motion. She felt a deep gratitude, not only for the help he provided, but also for the sense of hope he had reignited in her heart, bringing with it the sounds of the forest. Crickets chirping, the occasional hoot of an owl, and the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. They kept their fires small, enough to ward off the chill, but not enough to attract attention. Caleb shared a few survival tips, demonstrating how to stay alert while resting and how to keep watch without alarming the other. Nokomis absorbed each lesson, realizing that knowledge and awareness were as important as courage in ensuring their safety. During the quiet moments before sleep, Nokomis thought about the future. She did not know exactly what lay ahead, the challenges, the unknown terrain, or the people they might encounter, but she felt a renewed determination. She had a chance to reclaim her life, to move from fear into freedom. And she knew that with Caleb's guidance she was not facing this journey alone. The following day brought new challenges. They encountered a small stream that had swollen from recent rains, forcing them to find a way across without slipping or drawing attention. Caleb carefully tested the stones and guided Nokomis, showing her how to move lightly and maintain balance. They crossed successfully, but Nokomis felt the strain in her muscles and the sharp awareness of how easily one misstep could have led to danger. As they continued, the landscape changed. The forest gave way to rolling hills, where the grass was tall and the wind whispered across the open fields. Caleb reminded Nokomis to stay low, to use the tall grass for cover, and to move slowly. Every movement required careful thought, but Nokomis began to feel a sense of confidence growing inside her. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. By late afternoon, they reached a small ridge that offered a view of the land ahead. Caleb stopped and pointed out the next stretch of their journey. "From here, we'll need to move carefully," he said. "The terrain opens up, and there's less cover. But if we stay low and take it step by step, we'll be safe." Nokomis nodded, feeling both apprehension and determination. The path ahead was uncertain, but she had learned to trust in Caleb's judgment, and that trust gave her courage. As they descended the ridge, the shadows lengthened and the wind grew cooler. They moved silently, communicating mostly with gestures. Nokomis felt a deep sense of focus, her mind alert to every sound, movement, and change in the environment. The forest and hills had taught her to read the land, to anticipate obstacles, and to stay aware. Each step became a lesson, and each lesson strengthened her resolve. Night fell again, and they found another hidden spot to rest, a small dip between hills, shielded by rocks and shrubs. Caleb kept watch while Nokomis slept briefly, and then they switched. The rhythm of moving, resting, and observing became their routine, a cycle that balanced caution with the need for progress. Throughout the journey, Nokomis felt the bond between them grow. It was not just trust. It was a shared understanding of the challenges, the fears, and the hope that kept them moving. Caleb never forced her to act against her will, never dismissed her feelings, and always allowed her space to process the journey. That kindness, combined with his knowledge and courage, became a guiding light in her path. By the time they had traveled several days, Nokomis could see the difference in herself. She was stronger, more aware, and more confident. The journey was still far from over, but she had begun to reclaim a sense of agency over her life. Each step forward was a victory, each obstacle overcome a reminder of her own resilience. And yet, despite the progress, the journey was not without tension. Every sound could signal danger. Every shadow could hide a threat. Nokomis had learned to move with patience, to observe quietly, and to trust her instincts. She had also learned the value of guidance, of someone who could lead her through uncertainty with wisdom and care. As they settled for the night under a sky filled with stars, Nokomis felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. The journey had been challenging, and the road ahead was still long, but she had survived, adapted, and learned. She looked at Caleb, who was quietly arranging their small camp, and felt gratitude that went beyond words. He had become more than a guide. He was a companion, a protector, and a symbol of hope in a world that had often seemed cruel and unforgiving. In that moment, Nokomis understood that courage, trust, and determination were as important as the path itself. The journey through the forest and hills had not only been a physical challenge but also a test of spirit. And with Caleb by her side, she felt ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that step by step, careful choice by careful choice, she was moving toward freedom. The forest gradually began to thin as the days passed, giving way to rolling hills and open meadows. The air felt fresher here, freer, as if the land itself were offering a sense of relief after the long, tense journey. Nokomis walked beside Caleb, her steps lighter than before. She had grown stronger and more confident with each passing day, and the constant companionship of Caleb had helped ease the fear that had once shadowed every step she took. Even though the journey was still not over, the sight of the open land filled her with hope. The freedom she had longed for seemed closer now, for she no longer imagined herself constantly hiding. Instead, she pictured walking through the land safely, making choices for her own life. Caleb noticed the change in her demeanor, and for a brief moment he allowed himself a small smile. Their journey had tested both of them, but it had also revealed courage, resilience, and the quiet power of trust. As they descended a gentle slope, Caleb stopped and surveyed the land ahead. "We're close to a settlement now," he said quietly. "A place where you can rest, eat safely, and meet people who will not harm you. From here you must keep low, but the danger is behind us." Nokomis felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The idea of entering a new settlement brought excitement, but also a lingering fear. She had faced danger for so long that the thought of being around new people who might not understand her story made her nervous. Caleb seemed to notice her hesitation. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder and said, "Take it slow. You're not alone anymore. We'll go together, step by step." They moved carefully down the slope and toward the outskirts of the settlement. The buildings were small, sturdy, and spread out across the gentle land. Brusque, smoke rose from chimneys, carrying the scent of wood fires and cooking food. Children ran across the fields, and women carried baskets from one place to another. For the first time in months, Nokomis saw a place where life moved peacefully, without the constant shadow of fear. Caleb guided her to a small, quiet home at the edge of the settlement. He had spoken to the owner beforehand, a kind man who trusted Caleb and had agreed to offer shelter. Nokomis's heart swelled with gratitude as she stepped inside. The house was warm and welcoming, filled with the comforting smell of fresh bread and herbs. For the first time in weeks she could relax, even if only for a moment. The owner greeted her kindly, offering a simple meal and a place to rest. Nokomis accepted with quiet thanks, still careful not to draw attention. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, and felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had traveled through forests, hills, and rivers, faced fear and uncertainty, and now she could finally rest. The journey had been long and challenging, but this small moment of safety felt like a victory. After the meal, Caleb sat beside her, speaking softly about the days ahead. "You can stay here as long as you need," he said. "There are people here who will help you find work, food, and a chance to build a new life. You've been through so much, and now it's time to start over." Nokomis listened carefully, feeling the weight of his words. The idea of starting over was both terrifying and liberating. She had been running for so long that she had forgotten what it meant to live without fear. But now, with Caleb's help and the safety of this settlement, she could begin to imagine a life of her own choosing. Over the next few days, Caleb helped her settle in. He introduced her to the people in the settlement, showed her where to gather water, and taught her how to navigate the small community without drawing unwanted attention. Nokomis felt a growing sense of belonging. The people were kind, respectful, and willing to help without judgment. For the first time, she felt that she could be herself, free from the constant fear of raids, judgment, or harm. During this time, Caleb continued to teach her about the surrounding land. He showed her safe paths for travel, where to find fresh water, and how to move quietly if needed. Even though she was in a safe place, he wanted to ensure she could protect herself and navigate the world confidently. Nokomis listened intently, absorbing every detail. The lessons were not just practical. They were a reminder that she could survive and thrive on her own. One afternoon, as they walked through the fields together, Nokomis paused and looked at Caleb. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." I would not have made it here without you. Caleb nodded, his eyes gentle but firm. You were brave, he said. You took the first step when it was hardest. I just helped guide you. You have the strength to continue on your own. Nokomis felt a warmth in her chest. For so long she had felt powerless, running from danger, unsure of whom to trust. But now she could see her own courage reflected back at her through Caleb's words. She realized that the journey had not only been about reaching a safe place, it had been about discovering her own strength, resilience, and the power of hope. As the days turned into weeks, Nokomis began to build a new life. She helped in the settlement, learning skills that would allow her to live independently. She planted a small garden, collected water, and traded goods with neighbors. Each small accomplishment brought a sense of pride and confidence. The fear that had once dominated her life gradually faded, replaced by a cautious optimism and the sense of a future she could shape. Caleb visited often, checking on her progress and offering guidance when needed. Their bond, formed in the shared danger of the journey, remained strong. It was a bond built on trust, respect, and quiet understanding. Nokomis felt gratitude and affection for him, not just for saving her life, but for helping her rediscover hope and self-belief. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with deep oranges and purples, Nokomis stood outside the small home she had begun to call her own. She watched the children play, listened to the laughter and chatter of the people around her, and felt a profound sense of peace. For the first time in her life, she felt truly safe, around in uncertainty, and now she had a chance to live freely. Caleb stood beside her, watching the same sunset. It's not the end of your journey, he said quietly, but it's the beginning of a new life. Nokomis nodded, understanding the truth of his words. The road ahead would have challenges, but she was ready to face them. She had the courage, the skills, and the community to support her. And most importantly, she had hope. In the quiet of that evening, surrounded by safety, kindness, and the beauty of the land, Nokomis understood that life could offer more than fear and survival. It could offer peace, purpose, and connection. And she knew that her journey, difficult as it had been, had brought her here, to a place where she could finally live freely, with dignity and hope for the future. The next morning she rose early, ready to continue building her life. Caleb was there to see her off as she began the day, a quiet reminder that even after hardship, there could be support, friendship, and guidance. Nokomis smiled, feeling the strength within her, and stepped forward into the sunlight. The forest, the hills, and the dangers of the past were behind her. Ahead lay a life she could shape, filled with safety, opportunity, and freedom. Nokomis walked with confidence, knowing that she had survived, grown, and found hope. And with every step she carried the memory of the journey, the courage, the trust, and the bond that had brought her to this new beginning. For the first time in a long time, Nokomis truly felt free.